The statements and opinions expressed in this episode are those of Dr. Sigman and his guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of Veritime.
It's time to do healthcare smarter. This is Smart Medicine, hosted by Dr. Scott Sigman and powered by Veritime. Kids, we all had a vision of the future. Star Trek, the Jetsons, all these wild ideas that felt galaxies away. But what if I told you they're not? And I've got it on good authority from a pretty important doc that the future is not only real, it's already here. Now, before you go hitting the panic button and say, Dr. Sigman, I'm not ready for robots in the exam room. Let's take a deep breath. I'm with you. But what you're about to hear might change your mind. The future of healthcare isn't scary. It's something to be wildly excited about. And when it comes to understanding where medicine is headed, there's no better guide than Dr. Daniel Kraft. He's a physician, innovation powerhouse, founder of NextMed Health, and frankly, has more degrees than most of us have vacation days. In this finale to season 1, we cover it all. Wearables, superintelligence, the future of drug design, AI agents who can explain your labs, even autonomous robotic surgery. If you've ever wondered what care will look like in the next 5, 10, and even 50 years, this one's for you. Dr. Kraft, thank you so much for being with us on the Smart Medicine Podcast.
Great to be with you. I feel smarter already.
Absolutely. So look, when it comes to thinking about the future of medicine, we're told that you're kind of a big deal. But before we get to the future of medicine, I want to start with the past. And you're one of those underachievers that we like to have on the Smart Medicine Podcast. You went to Brown for undergrad, Stanford for medical school, Harvard, not just for one residency, you went for a combined residency of internal medicine and pediatrics. You're double boarded in internal medicine and pediatrics. You did a fellowship training in hematology, oncology, and bone marrow transplant. My gosh, Dr. Kraft, you were a busy guy.
I didn't do all that at once, but yeah, the usual physician scientist track. And because in medical school, I liked everything. I just couldn't just pick one residency. So I did two.
Yeah, God bless you. That's fantastic. So, but listen, with all that exceptional training, when was the moment that you started recognizing that healthcare and innovation and technology was something that was going to become a passion for you?
Well, I was a kid I grew up in the DC area. I always liked gadgets and futures and things. I grew up going to the Smithsonian, the Air and Space Museum and beyond. But I remember where I got the first taste of sort of where technology was heading was, I think I was in medical school and I had the first Hewlett-Packard 200LX pocket computer, right? And would let you sort of take some notes and you could beam them to other people with a little red light. And I thought, wow, this is going to be much better than handwriting and can kind of keep my portable brain. And then my sort of first taste of doing something about it was when I was a senior medical student at Stanford. There's a Stanford medical bookstore and the books were never on sale. Once a year, they have a stethoscope sale. And the internet had just come online. I saw the first e-commerce platforms. And I thought, wow, we should be able to sell medical books online because everyone buys the same Grey's Anatomy and Dubin and Stryer, classic textbooks. And so I built a little online medical bookstore, coded it myself, learned HTML, and sort of launched that my first year at Mass General. It was sort of the combination of sort of liking to see new things and how they could interface into health and medicine.
Yeah, I mean, we take it for granted today, right? 95, 96, the internet was starting, right? I mean, our kids and everything that we take for granted with our smartphones and all the stuff that we do now. All right, so look, it sounds like they're going to change TED Talks to the Kraft Talks. You've done a whole bunch of TED Talks. I mean, I say that jokingly, but you really have used the TED Talks as sort of a means of communication for you. So how did that experience, because you've used a lot of that for communication, how has that helped you to communicate to the public about your thoughts?
Well, I'll just zoom back a little bit. When I first started going to TED in 2006, I was a postdoc at Stanford. And no one knew really about TED. It was a bit of a secret club. There were no TED Talks. It was in Monterey. It was like 1,000 people. What I would say mostly about that was it got me out of my sort of stem cell medicine bubble. And all of a sudden I was meeting these amazing entrepreneurs and folks from technology, entertainment, and design. And it really opened up my world to the sort of art of the possible and the sort of convergence of fields where kind of the most exciting things happen. So I credit TED with sort of really changing my mindset, and many of my friends and colleagues came from that first experience like almost 20 years ago. And then the TED Talk thing, it was like accidental as well. The first one, I had a medical device I'd invented at Stanford through Stanford Biodesign called the Marrow-Miner. I volunteered to do a live stage demo. So that was quite terrifying. But my biggest one was 2011. I think it was the Future Med, and it was a little low pressure. I didn't memorize it. So I was a bit of a flow state. They actually ended up giving me a couple extra minutes, which I took advantage of. And I also then became a bit of an accidental conference organizer through Exponential Medicine and NextMed Health.
Yeah, so good segue. So talk to us about NextMed Health, because I know you're the founder, formerly Exponential Medicine. How does that help to create a community about shared experiences, collaboration, communication? How has that worked out?
So I'm, hematologist and oncologist by background. I'll go to the ASH and ASCO meetings. The cardiologists go to cardiology meetings. Psychiatrists go to those. There's digital health. There's pharma meetings. But very rarely do you blend folks together and also have them look at the lens of what's coming next with technology. So started this program initially called Exponential Medicine with about 100 people, having these folks from 30 countries come together, kind of sharing in a pretty small, intimate setting what was most exciting to them, where they saw the future was going, and the need and opportunity to cross-collaborate in a very non-transactional way. It was really magic. Innovators from every field, from psychedelics to chatbots to drones to neurotech to brain-computer interfaces to CRISPR. And so what I found is compelling is to get people not just out of their silos, but sort of taking the mindset of the art of the possible and learning from something that might be done in cardiology could be applied to mental health, or something being done in South Africa could leapfrog and be applicable to the rest of the world.
That's awesome. I find that cross-pollination, even outside within medicine, oftentimes allows us to provide new ideas and concepts. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now in 2025. What do you see as the biggest opportunities to drive meaningful change? And do you also see some key barriers that are holding us back at this point?
Well, I think one of the sort of meta trends that's starting to bubble up with the biggest opportunity for change is the ability to do not just sick care and health care, but self-care, right? We're now empowered as humans, as patients, as people to get more engaged in our health, whether it's from a low-cost wearable, whether it's your Apple Watch or a Ring or Fitbit or pick your technology to get some insights, whether it's in your sleep or your steps or your mental health, giving people more agency to not have to wait to go to their clinician to get insights. And then, of course, we're opening up this whole era of multi-omics, right? But now, you can get many things sort of analyzed, whether it's your deep sequencing all the way to your labs and aging scores, and hopefully gain insights that you can do something about that, not just to manage a disease after it occurs, but to be proactive and even have the opportunity to crowdsource and share that knowledge. So that's sort of one meta trend. And of course, we'll talk about AI and LLMs. That's now enabling folks to be very engaged and to make sense of that complex data in ways that would have taken a highly trained clinician and an expensive visit and months of waiting time sometimes to access. And it's still early days for that revolution.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. And patient data at this point is really starting to explode. I know that you're expert in wearables. We'll get to that too. But the wearables, the genomics, the real-time monitoring that's really available, it's really just sort of coming onto the scenes. How do you see that this data revolution is going to shape healthcare innovation, and what still needs to happen to sort of unlock its true potential moving forwards?
I think everyone's heard the term big data, and big data might be the new oil, but oil by itself doesn't run the engine. The engine only works if it has a car and takes you to some destination. So the challenge with some of these wearables and otherables is that they create a lot of data, but no one wants to look at the raw data. If I'm your doc, I certainly don't want to see every piece of sleep data and step data and beyond. What I want is the insights about you, right? I want to see potentially have an easy workflow and interface where I can see Scott's, not just your sleep patterns, but changes from your baseline over time to almost have a bit of a continuous physical exam. And I think where we're starting to see the shift, as I call it, from quantified self. A lot of us are data geeks and we have all the data from our wearables and otherables on our phone. From quantified self to quantified health. Well, that's going to start to flow to your clinician or to your AI health coach. And it's going to start to guide you to personalized, proactive health span and wellness related activities and behaviors, or pick up early signs of changes.
Yeah, awesome. So staying with that, specifically on the wearables, because I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this. I mean, right now it's watches, it's some rings, but I mean, there's some really cool stuff coming down the pipeline, whether it's going to be the glasses that everybody's starting to talk about, or sensor embedded clothing, maybe biometric pins. But you were just sort of talking about, do you see that, like, even for like monitoring like real-time cancer treatments as to how people are evolving, and instead of going to a doctor's office and drawing labs? I mean, Can all of this stuff really come to fruition where there's really so many touch points outside of the doctor's office?
It's going to be more about how do you make sense of this data, right? All these different wearables track my sleep and give me a roughly similar sleep score, but look at it slightly differently. It doesn't really matter if I'm looking at one sleep score or another, or my steps are 10% off. Not really. What again matters is the change from baseline. And speaking of oncology for a second, a lot of time we spent on the oncology side is dealing with patients who have low blood counts and might have a fever and have risk of infection. Or your smartwatch or your smart patch or even the camera on your laptop can pick up temperature. And that might give you early proactive warning before someone gets septics and needs antibiotics as a small example. So I think it's going to be less about any one particular data stream or any particular wearable or otherable, but making sense of those multimodal pieces to go, wow, that looks like a change in your voice biomarker indicates that cough might be TB or COVID and not just a common cold. So that's early days. We still have a real challenge of sharing data and making those insights useful to clinicians and patients. But I think that's where the arc is going to head.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So AI, artificial intelligence, has such a broad sort of term at this point, right? At the end of the day, right now, most people are doing it for like emails, internet searches, and things like that. And there are levels of AI. And so I thought I would sort of just give a broad description for our listeners, and then we're going to ask you a couple of questions about that. So we have the narrow AI, which is sort of what we're doing now, which helps you to live your everyday stuff and write your emails or text, those sorts of things. We're going to eventually probably get to artificial general intelligence, which is AGI, which is the point when AI gets so good, it starts reasoning and thinking like a human being. Then we get to the superintelligence, which is the one I think everybody is most worried about, which is when we get to a level of intelligence that exceeds the human capacity as far as decision-making, problem solving. So from your perspective, how should we be thinking about this from narrow AI all the way up to superintelligence? Where are we today, and what should the medical community really be preparing for as we move forwards?
Well, in some cases, the future is coming a bit faster than we think, right? We're on this exponential curve and it's hard for our brains to grok how quickly things are moving. And now, in terms of the medical side, it already is essentially super intelligent. I mean, the most recent study published 2 weeks ago by Microsoft, did 80% better than good doctors who had 12 years of experience would get things about 20% right and cost $8,000 to work up the diagnosis, compared to this new combined platform, which would get 80% right and have a $3,000 cost. And that's today, right?
Whoa, 80% accuracy at a third of the cost? That deserves a closer look. So I pulled up the study Dr. Kraft mentioned, and he's absolutely right. The results are kind of jaw-dropping. AI diagnosed cases 4 times more accurately than a group of doctors. And look, let me be crystal clear here. This isn't about knocking physicians. These were doctors with 12, 15, even 20 years of practice under their belts. But here's the thing. The human brain can only retain so much. We're working with incomplete data, packed schedules, and real information overload. AI, on the other hand, can synthesize mountains of data in seconds. If we can bring down costs, deliver faster answers, and give patients the clarity they need sooner, I say, count me in. That's not competition, that's collaboration.
Good doctors who had 12 years of experience would get things about 20% right and cost $8,000 to work up the diagnosis, compared to this new combined platform, which would get 80% right and have a $3,000 cost. And that's today, right? And that was doing models of diagnosis, which are more realistic than just a medical board exam. The challenge is, how do we trust this? How do we know how do we really judge its accuracy? And it may be malpractice in a few years not to have used the AI in doing a diagnostic workup or picking the right drug.
Yeah, that's great. So let's stick with AGI here for a minute in particular, and we'll talk about some of these real world examples. But I think, for example, like the discovery of new medicines, like I do work with a new medication called suzetrigine. It's the first oral pain medication that's non-opioid, first new classification in 30 years. It took them 25 years to figure out the compound that works well with the sodium channel blocker that they needed to come up with. I can only imagine 2 years ago and where we are now, probably within 15 minutes, they could have probably figured out which compounds or family of compounds may have worked better. So I would envision with AGI, we can identify new medications, optimizing clinical trials, as you talked about, perhaps using digital twins, maybe synthesizing large data sets to deliver more personalized care, as you said, with a specific genomics, your genetic profile of how a specific medication may work better for you. I find that fascinating. So give us some real world examples as to where you see we're going.
Well, there's often low-hanging fruit that's been around for a while. We just haven't plugged it in or aren't paying for it. Like, for example, if you had high cholesterol and I was trying to pick the right statin. So the trick is, how do I see your genetic information and how do I get that recommendation to pick the right statin? Because I can't remember or memorize your SNP, CYP5 expression profiles. So that's the low-hanging fruit. The trick is, how do you put that into the workflow? Who pays for it? Who gets rewarded? And how do you incentivize the leveraging of that kind of impactful data? I think where it's going to head, even using that to pick the right peptide therapies, like all the GLP-1s, might match different individuals. There might be longevity cocktails that really match you based on your age and your risk factors and other modalities. So you can imagine, and I've been working on a project to 3D print your personalized polypill. That might be your longevity pill, or might be the one to manage your chronic cardiovascular disease and hypertension. So, and back to drug discovery, the big blockbuster drugs may be going not necessarily away, but we're going to have more opportunity to, again, design drugs proactively using AGI or now quantum computing, which is coming online. We're seeing a whole movement of repurposing drugs. So drugs that are already FDA cleared, but they can be used for another indication. And that's super powerful. And many drugs that fail clinical trials because 5% of the folks have a side effect, we can potentially identify those and make those drugs that were not approved optimal for those who match the need. So huge opportunity on the pharma side.
I mean, it really seems like exciting times. And in a profound way, I've been in practice for 30 years, right? And there weren't a lot of crazy advances in the first 25. I hate to say it, but it seems to me like we're on the cusp of something really phenomenal here for humankind. All right, so my mother Judy's listening, so I want to give the basic terminology. So when we discuss an agent, you build an agent within AI. Give us a brief definition of what that means.
The way I think about it is something you can interface with, and it doesn't have to look like in a humanoid form, but now they can getting pretty much past the uncanny valley. It can look like your mother. It can look like your favorite clinician or Star Trek character. And it's not just going to talk to you from a script, but it will synthesize. You can talk to an agent essentially on ChatGPT now or Grok, or the voice elements are getting so human-like but they can give you a bit of that human experience to interface with that complex information, and then give you particular guidance on maybe what's next or what's the next best action. And so these agents have different forms. Some of them can do things for you, like schedule your appointments and your Uber ride to the pharmacy, or eventually much more complex elements.
So I thought we'd do a little bit of an exercise here. The idea is to apply some of these AI things and how you would advise people is to see where we're going. So we know that you do a lot of work for Fortune 500 companies in particular when it comes to this type of technology and innovation. And so let's say you're advising them, what direction should these companies be going?
I steal that often used analogy from the hockey player Wayne Gretzky, that you want to skate to where the puck is going to be. And many large companies, even smaller ones, particularly in health tech, life sciences, biopharma, they're big ships, right? They're quarter to quarter. They take a while to steer, and they're ripe for being disrupted by new players, whether they're AI discovery engines or some next generation system that can think differently and be more nimble. So I always encourage you, it doesn't need to be a Fortune 50 company, but think about skating to where the puck will be in 2030 and 2035. And think about that super convergence where AI meets robotics and 3D printing and nanotech and genomics and virtual and augmented and mixed reality. And that's where kind of the magic is going to happen, and the really ability to move things. But that takes not just technology shifts, but cultural shifts and challenges often in the new ideas been escaping from the old ones. And many larger and legacy companies are Fortune 50 today, but they may be in the dustbin if they're still not shifting, not just their technology, but their mindsets to get these things out to the market. And things are moving so fast that sometimes it's faster than regulatory, reimbursement, ethics, policy can keep up with. And so it takes a bit of a convergent, exponential, nimble mindset, I think, to adapt to this future. And one last caveat is the future, in many ways, another quote I'll steal, is already here, just not evenly distributed. And so you don't need to always reinvent the wheel or develop a new app or technology. I've been building a platform, a website called digital.health, has over 5,000 solutions already. Many of them are AI enabled, for everything from radiology to mental health to managing your practice to drug discovery. So there's a lot of things out there that might meet a need that you might have as a clinician, as a patient, as an innovator. If you can sort of sift through those and search for them and sometimes get inspired or plug those into your workflows or find things to compete with and improve upon.
All right, skate to where the puck is going. As a hockey doc, that one really stuck with me. If you're an innovator out there trying to shape the future of healthcare, it's not about what's happening now, it's about what's predicting next. And yes, that's easier said than done, especially if you're part of a big organization where old ideas die hard. But that's the challenge, right? If you want to break through, you've got to look forward, stay agile, and sometimes be willing to let go of tradition. Coming up next, we dive into autonomous robotic surgery, the real priorities for future medical students, and Dr. Kraft's take on how AI might actually change the way our brains work. Before we jump back in, this episode of Smart Medicine is powered by Veradigm. If you're a provider, payer, or part of the life sciences world, and you're ready to work smarter, connect with the team at Veradigm. So let's shift gears now. Let's think about our patients. And right, because they're at the end of the day, that's what we do for a living. We care for people that need our help. And so, as we've talked about so much on this podcast already, AI in healthcare is evolving at breakneck speed, whether it's new tools, treatments, buzzwords, everything is coming at these patients very quickly. So at this point, what should the average patient really be paying attention to when it comes to AI innovation in healthcare about how it would impact their personal care?
Well, one, it can really empower you. Like when we were in medical training, the only way you'd get access was a pass into the medical school library, and you'd have to pull out a journal or a textbook. And now the web changed that, and people when used to go to Dr. Google, now they can go to Dr. GPT. And there's a large number of pretty famous examples of a mom who had a kid who'd seen 16 specialists, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And she fed the symptoms into even an old version of GPT, and it came up with the tethered cord or whatever it was a zebra that might have been missed. And so I think one of the ways folks can engage with AI is, again, it moving so quickly. There's no one AI that's better than the other to go to, but start engaging with it. Maybe add in your health goals and ask it to explain to you a diagnosis that you have or a family member or friend has in language that an 8th grader might understand. Use it to upload your PDF of your labs. And let's say you have labs from several years and say, what's changed and what's relevant? And so that's some of the early hanging fruit.
That's very empowering that you actually can take part in not necessarily the decision making, but the understanding of the pathologies that you have with this really incredible tool that's available in so many ways other than just having your kids do their homework. So really think about that, patients, 100%. So at this point, I still go to the operating room. I was there this morning. I operate on 5 people for this podcast. There's a lot of cool stuff that's happening. When's surgery going to be autonomously performed by a humanoid that might actually do it as well as we can? I mean, do you see that down the line? What are people talking about?
Down the line, it happened last month, published by Johns Hopkins. They had the first demonstration of a basically laparoscopic surgery done fully autonomously.
The pig was dead, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah, it's a start.
Yeah, that is a good start. I agree.
It might not have been kosher, but it was a good pig. But, before that, they showed the first, anastomosis stuff. So just context, when I came to Stanford for fellowship, I think a few years later, you started to see some of these very early versions of the self-driving cars on campus. 2005, the DARPA competition was launched to do autonomous driving. And the first 2 years, all the cars fell off the road. And they had some humanoid robot competitions, and they'd all sort of fall over. And now, 15, 20 years later, Waymos are going down the street, and you can get a self-driving car, at least in San Francisco, and coming to where my neighborhood soon. And with many elements of upskilling clinicians, it goes from you're driving yourself to a little bit of driver assist to full autonomy. And I think it's not that far off that, as we saw starting in pigs, but in 5-10 years, what that's going to be is pretty incredible. And it's not going to replace surgeons like you. In some cases, it might be more like, I'm a pilot as well, but when I just flew today on an airliner, the pilots don't do much but monitor the AI flying the plane. The plane can even land itself and take off itself. So I think there'll be more of that kind of pilot in the cockpit, kind of as a co-pilot. But look at the unmet need. And we're fortunate to live in areas where, you throw a stone, you hit a surgeon, but there's huge surgical deserts. I think 3 billion people have no access to even to getting a basic biopsy or appendectomy and are dying. And I think we're going to see this sort of technology move to places like sub-Saharan Africa and other places where there is no surgeon or anesthesiologist, where you can port in and still supervise, but it might move quicker than we think. in areas where the regulatory constraints aren't so large, but where the unmet need is deep.
We think of food deserts and surgical deserts where literally patients are at risk because they don't have the medical care and the providers that are necessary. And I mean, I really see that with the ambient technologies that are coming down the road, that we're going to make the practice of medicine better for the doctors and also for our patients. But are we going to still be in the office? I mean, is it going to be all virtual, or what do you think?
Well, here's the question. I mean, in some cases, technology has gotten on our way, right? We have to spend time typing the EMR and feeding the beast, and now ambient computing is coming along and hopefully improving health and happiness of clinicians and lowering burnout when it's applied in smart ways. But just to zoom back, I mean, a medical student starting medical school today in 2025 won't finish residency till 2032 or 33. Who should you choose for medical school or nursing school or pharmacy? What do they need to be good at? Physical chemistry and organic chemistry and passing the MCATs in the old school memorization way? Or do they need to have not just good IQ, but good EQ and maybe good hand-eye coordination to play the video games and guide the robotic surgeons and interventional procedures of the future? And are they learning AI today or digital health or big data in medical school? Most don't have anything in their curriculum that touches on what they're going to need in 5 years, let alone 10 or 20. So that's one element. And then back to what's the practice going to look like? I'm on the board of an Indian company called jivi.ai. It has one of the best LLMs for doing diagnostics, but also has a health coach and also has diagnostics and vital sign tracking on it. It can talk to you in Hindi or Farsi or Swedish. So before you even see you as a doc or me as a primary care doc, you're going to talk to an agent first. It'll do the triage. It's going to do a review of systems. It knows what you did last summer, knows what your genetic risks are. It'll appropriately triage you when you do show up on the virtual visit or the physical visit. Most of those questions will be answered, and you'll have that co-pilot with you to maybe guide the rest of the exam or the diagnostic workup or the therapy. So I think in surgical specialties, it's a bit different than the cognitive and primary care ones. But given there's a huge gap in primary care in the US and around the world, we need these solutions to sort of filter in and work hand in hand with the humans in the loop.
Yeah, it's just so amazing to think all of these crazy things just seem like it was just so far fetched of the Jetsons when we were growing up. But this stuff is becoming more and more reality every day.
Well, and the Jetsons and other science fiction like Star Trek have informed our thinking about the future of medicine. Like the Jetsons episode with the AI robot doctor, and AI meets robotics today and are getting more and more autonomous is going to be part of the future of care. Humanoid body robots or not even humanoid ones are going to play a huge role in healthcare, from the operating room to like your AI powered dog with ChatGPT that can follow someone around the house and be their companion, but also their health coach and help them if they have a fall. We're going to see, the advent of like the Star Trek tricorder. I've been helping X Prize for many years, the medical tricorder X Prize that we ran 10 years ago to kind of prize bringing diagnostics into a single device. And now that's taking off in different modalities. So sometimes the science fiction, whether it's Star Trek or the Jetsons, can inform our thinking, but we don't want to have a failure of imagination. I think the art of the possible now with all these amazing advancements is not to kind of reformat medicine in a maybe more tech-enabled way, but maybe to reimagine it completely.
One of the other things that I think about healthcare right now that's just such a drag on all of us is the whole reimbursement side of things and insurance and the prior authorizations. And we're powered by Veradigm. How do you envision, I mean, you talked a little bit about the front office and the back office and really trying to use AI to perhaps simplify and make our lives better. How do you envision it in that day-to-day care as well?
Well, think how much time you and other medical colleagues spend fighting with the insurance company for having to do follow-ups and seeing what's been denied. I think hopefully smart medicine is going to get truly smart, right? It's going to really automatically approve the right therapy and not have to require you to argue with the former clinician in the insurance companies, incentivized to say no. Hopefully some of the things, the tools we talked about, whether it's your digital biomarkers and clinical trials that have been rebooted, can really show the evidence much faster that certain new interventions, whether it's a digital therapeutic or a drug or a device, are impactful. And so I think hopefully the seamless, so much of the friction of medicine, right? How much of our cost goes to the front office side, that can be made much more smart and seamless and evidence-based, and again, improve the experience for the caregivers and the team, and then hopefully make health access more equitable and democratized, something that's going to be more and more challenging in our political environment here and around the world.
Yeah, and there's so many startups. It's really hard. It's drinking through a fire hose at this point, trying to identify picking the right horse, who's going to be the leader, who's the one that's going to win. So I think there's a lot of work that's going to happen here as we get to this more seamless way in which we're providing medical care. But so we still have a need to figure all this out together as well.
I'd say a lot of that need is there's a lot of amazing point solutions out there, and a lot of those companies have some amazing technology and entrepreneurs and chutzpah, but they have trouble at that last mile getting that clinician to prescribe that AI-enabled virtual reality app for treating ADHD, for example, or to leverage that home continuous blood pressure monitor embedded into their smartwatch that can manage CHF. So I think it's going to be a bit of a systems design thinking and convergence approach. We need to kind of connect these dots. And you're seeing some examples, like the Mayos of the world are having platform plays that are trying to not be fragmented, but to think about the entire healthcare journey and ecosystem in a more integrated way. And that's often the data, meaning the devices and the tools and the solutions and the workflows of the clinician and the consumer and the patient and the family members in a holistic way.
So Dan, this has been a real enlightening conversation. I'm so bullish and excited about AI as we move forwards into all aspects of our life, but there is still growing controversy and even some fear about the future of AI and its impact on humankind. And as we wrap up, I'd love for you to share sort of some closing thoughts with our listeners and perhaps even talk to some of the skeptics about how you envision an optimistic future with AI truly enhancing healthcare, elevating the human potential that truly becomes a force for good in medicine.
Well, I'll start with maybe a little bit of a downside. I mean, I love playing with AI, and it's often inspiring and fun and magical, but there's a potential downsides. One of them is, I always share the quote from Sam Altman, the co-founder of OpenAI, GPT is like an e-bike for your mind, which is great, right? It lets us write our notes, maybe ask smarter questions, make a picture for us. But what if your kids never learned how to ride a regular bike? Or they never developed their biking muscles? Or you're a medical student and you never develop a differential diagnosis on your own without the AI helping you out? And many examples, including a study published by MIT Media Lab in June that showed your brain on GPT could get soft and lose its capabilities. So I think we need to be thinking about what's the future of the human mind and creativity and experience, and how do we catalyze it and upskill it without turning into non-muscular puddles sitting on the couch. On the optimistic side, we have so many gaps and pain points in healthcare, and so much of our sick care model is based on intermittent data that comes in usually collected in the four walls of the clinic or the ER or the ICU, and leads to a reactive mindset waiting for disease to happen, the heart attack, the stroke, the late stage cancer. And the art of the possible in the future, enabled by AI, is to be much more continuous with our data, and not just the data, but the insights that are personalized, can be much more proactive, hyper-contextualized, applied almost anywhere through the sort of digital AI layer to almost anybody on the planet, which can mean we can spend more time on the proactive health span side of the equation, enhancing our health span, having much more efficient cost spend, right? Maybe rewarding and paying for prevention. But we don't practice evidence-based medicine. We practice reimbursement-based medicine. So we can align the incentives to use AI on these smart, sometimes engagement tools and crowdsourcing knowledge to build that kind of Google Maps of health. We have a huge potential to bend the cost curve and the outcome curve, and to make health and medicine more available to anybody, anytime, and to build a learning engine that empowers all of us.
Well, Dan, you have certainly provided our listeners an enlightening, empowering vision of technology and innovation in healthcare for our present as well as our future. And we can't thank you enough for taking the time today for sharing your thoughts and ideas.
A real honor and pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much. A note for your listeners is don't wait for the future to happen, right? Number one, you can see a pain point in your own life or your friends or your family or your patients, and sometimes build the solutions or find the kid down the street who can build the app or 3D print the medical device and get it out there, even in a small pilot. The ability now to scale and do innovation and build solutions and at least try them out is come down exponentially in many cases. You don't need to have $1 million lab. And as you think about creating the future, I frame it at Next Med Health, what's now near next, but also what's needed, right? It's not just enough to have the technology and the smart funding and the great team, but what's needed to catalyze that to be applied and meet the last mile and the last inch of care to reach everybody everywhere in a much more healthy and equitable way.
Wow, what a fun one. This conversation with Dr. Kraft has me wondering which sci-fi movie we're stepping into next. But hey, no need to go back to the future because it's already here. Look, all of this has me fired up. But if you're feeling a little nervous, that's normal. Change is uncomfortable. And as humans, yeah, we're usually not great at change. But when you embrace change, lean into the unknown, and start preparing for what's next, suddenly the future feels a little less scary. In fact, I'd say that's smart medicine. I'm Dr. Scott Sigman, and that wraps Season 1 of Smart Medicine. I hope you've enjoyed these conversations as much as I have. Season 2 is on the horizon, and I couldn't be more excited. See you in the future.